Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. I'm Reed Price, and today we are going to talk about Initiative 2117. It's getting a lot of attention. You've probably seen the ads, but one of the things that's of interest to me is what is the act that's behind the kerfuffle? So the initiative aims to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, and so we're going to talk with Mike Kelly, who has been working on no for 2117 against the initiative, and we're going to find out why, and most importantly, what the Climate Commitment Act is, so we know what we're being asked to repeal or decide not to repeal. I want to start though by acknowledging that we are sponsored for Something to Talk About by Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island. They offer independent and assisted living and memory care up on Rolling Bay, and they also have day stay and respite programs. If you'd like to take a tour, have lunch on them, call Celia or Jamie at 206-594-1010, 206-594-1010, or check out fieldstonecommunities.com online. And we always like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Puget Sound Coast Salish people, specifically here on Bainbridge Island, the ancestral homelands of the Suquamish, the people of the clear salt water who have lived here since time immemorial. We are grateful for them, and we are learning from their stewardship of these lands and waters. And the picture you see up on the left there is Solving the Climate Challenge from the Citizens Climate Lobby, which is an organization that Mike is very much involved in. And maybe you can just tell us a little bit about the broader work that Citizens Climate Lobby does, and then we'll get into to what the CCA is.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Reed, and really thank you for sponsoring this and for having me, and look forward to talking to everyone. So I am Mike Kelly. I live here on Bainbridge Island. I lived here for 20 years on Bainbridge, and I'm a Washington State co-coordinator, which is a volunteer position with Citizens Climate Lobby. We're a national organization that's been working for about 15 years now on addressing climate change. And we have 14 chapters here in Washington State. We have over 400 chapters in the country of citizen volunteers that are working on climate change. And it's really climate change that brought me to this fight on 2117. And so I've volunteered as the Kitsap County co-coordinator for No on 2117, which is the campaign to encourage a no vote on 2117. And I'm also a semi-retired small business owner here on Bainbridge Island. So this is what I spend my retirement time on, which is a lot of fun. So what I want to start with is a brief video that kind of summarizes the Climate Commitment Act, which, as Reed said, is the core issue behind 2117. So I'm going to play the video now, and then we'll continue with the presentation after the video.
We've known climate change is happening and causing harm to our state and our planet. But the latest research suggests it might be happening even faster than scientists predicted. The cause is fossil fuels. The answer is to reduce fossil fuels. We use a lot of fossil fuel to power our vehicles, schools, homes, and offices. Burning fossil fuels causes climate change and creates pollution that makes people sick. That's why Washington is taking action to reduce climate pollution. These actions include the Clean Energy Transformation Act, which requires 100% clean energy by 2045, a nation-leading clean buildings policy, clean transportation policies to promote clean fuels and zero-emission vehicles, and a landmark policy known as the Climate Commitment Act. The Climate Commitment Act is working to drive down emissions from the biggest polluters, make them pay their fair share, help reduce pollution, and protect our families and communities. The CCA covers 75% of statewide emissions. The policy requires the state's biggest polluters to participate in the CCA's Cap and Invest program. They can reduce how much they pollute by changing the way they operate, or they can purchase pollution allowances. Over time, as the cap on pollution comes down, fewer allowances are available for purchase. The revenue from the pollution allowances is being reinvested in projects and programs that help families, businesses, and local governments switch from fossil fuels to cleaner energy, and to help Washington communities deal with the effects of climate change. Examples include quiet and clean electric school buses for our children, thousands more EV charging stations, free transit for all young people, safer sidewalks and trails for people to walk and bike, cost-saving weatherization, and more. The CCA will benefit everyone in Washington State. It will reduce pollution, protect our communities from climate impacts, and create jobs in the clean energy economy. The policy puts a special emphasis on ensuring benefits for vulnerable communities that have to shoulder the greatest burden, including seniors, tribes, families, and neighborhoods with lower incomes or people with challenging health conditions. We can build a clean energy future for Washington State. It's time to act.
So that summarizes the Climate Commitment Act, and I'll just sort of reiterate and you're seeing my screen, Lee?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So I'll just reiterate the benefits, which is, as it mentioned, when we burn fossil fuels, we create the gases that cause climate change, but we also create a lot of just normal air pollution that leads to asthma and other respiratory illnesses. And so by reducing fossil fuel burning, we're also reducing air pollution. And we raise money for transportation. So these auctions that are happening that started in 2023 are raising money that goes into transportation programs, clean energy conservation, and a whole bunch of different wildfire suppression, salmon, a whole bunch of things that are trying to mitigate and address the effects of climate change. And we've raised over $2 billion so far from polluters paying these fees for the credits. And ultimately, as the video mentioned, it does try to address environmental justice concerns because we know the impacts of climate change are not equally distributed. So just to reiterate some of the things that were mentioned, highways, roads, bridges are covered here, ferries, of course, which is important to us. Public transportation, we may be the largest entity in the United States to provide free transit passes for all youth under 18, which has got a lot of really benefits. I mean, one benefit is it starts to create that habit of using public transit when you can do it for free when you're young. There's also a bunch of different things that are happening in terms of improving buses and trains and investing in mass transit. Ferries, particularly important here in Kitsap and on Bainbridge. There are new boats that are being funded by the Climate Commitment Act, the upgrades to ports to be able to handle the new hybrid electric diesel ferries that are coming in. All in all, it's about $435 million in CCA funding that would be lost if 2117 passes in November. Now, we know that the legislature is probably not going to let the ferry system just collapse and stop functioning, but it probably would take them a couple of years to pick up the pieces from this if this ends up passing, and that just delays the new ferries and the addressing the cancellations and delays that we have even longer beyond what the WSF is already thinking. There also is money going in for EV charging around the state. And being able to help with that. I mentioned port electrification and shore power, better sort of use of that at not just ferry ports, but also other ports like in the Port of Seattle. One of the things that's really interesting is kind of trying to encourage alternative means of transportation. So making safe routes to school so that kids can commute on bikes to school without being in traffic and without being at risk and so forth. So bikes and bike trails and doing better work on that. We also are doing a bunch on buildings. Buildings are a major source of climate change gases and emissions. So energy audits to be able to help people figure out how to improve the efficiency of their buildings, electrification and efficiency upgrades into buildings that are existing buildings. Forests are a major source of being able to store carbon. The trees are kind of sucking in that. And so preserving forests, dealing with wildfires, which are becoming an increasing problem here in Washington State. And so funding some of the wildfire suppression and wildfire fighting that's happening is an important part of this as well as
and that's some of that CCA money that's going to help with forest restoration and management.
Exactly right. Yeah. And also, not just in sort of rural areas and in Eastern Washington, but also urban tree canopies. We know that having better planting of trees in urban areas can really reduce the effect of heat, which is becoming an increasing problem significantly. And so investing in those urban tree canopies as well. Some work in agriculture, trying to do better, kind of smarter farming and better sustainable farming, and helping farmers do that. And also salmon restoration. So doing some recovery of salmon routes and helping with planting native species along streams, so to protect them better from the overheating that happens and that damages salmon. And a lot of other stuff as well, going to tribes, going to schools, methane capture and so forth. So there's a lot of things that are in the Climate Commitment Act. And the important thing to realize is it's just getting started. It only passed in 2021, and it took the state a couple of years to sort of put in place all the mechanisms. So our first auctions of these permits that are sort of the key element here happened in 2023. So we're really only about a year and a half into this right now. And so it's still early days in terms of how much money is getting out there. And so one of the things we hear is people don't see the immediate effects of this. And that's understandable because it takes a little while for that to filter out. But there is a lot of money already being spent, and we're going to see more and more of that as this continues on over the next 15 or 20 years. We have a map that I'm happy to point people to. You can write down you can write down the URL or just write down the name and Google or search it.
If you're watching this on YouTube later, I'll put that link in the description box down below on YouTube. CleanProsperousInstitute.org.
Exactly right. So this is Clean and Prosperous Washington. It's a nonprofit, and they do research on how to address climate change. And they were one of the backers of the Climate Commitment Act. And so one of the things they've done with this map that they have on their website is they've harvested all the data from the Washington state budget. And as you can imagine, a government budget is a super, super complicated document that has many, many different accounts, and the names of how things are spent is not always completely transparent. And so to try to navigate through that budget and figure out, well, what money is actually going from the CCA into things in my community and things that I might care about is a little bit of a tough task if you're looking at the Washington state website. So what Clean and Prosperous has done is hired some data scientists, and they've sucked all that data down, and then they've just given you the ability to pivot it based on what kinds of things you're interested in, like schools or air pollution reduction or solar, as well as by communities. And so you can see what's actually happening in a particular county or zip code, so that you can see what programs are being funded, both now and in the future, because part of what the Climate Commitment Act, we expect this money to come in for years. And so some of the money is being spent now, but there also are future commitments. For example, the ferries, we know we're going to be buying those over the next few years. And so the commitments to have that money there to pay for the construction of those and the port changes and everything is part of that's happening over years. So Clean and Prosperous, great place to go to get information about how the money is actually being spent. And so, we just thank you as well for a livable planet that we have, and improving that. The issue is also bigger than in just Washington. Washington is a leader nationally on this, and so we want to make sure that we set an example for the country, which we really are doing. And so, having that is important. So I've talked a lot about the benefits of the CCA and what the CCA does, for our communities. But there are some perceived problems with it, like any legislation. One of the sponsors said, in all my years in Olympia, I don't think we've ever passed a perfect law. And this is not a perfect law either. There are things that need to probably be tweaked in it. And so higher gas prices is one impact that we saw last year from the CCA, because the oil companies and polluters, refineries, were paying these fees and passing some of them on along at the gas pump. And so briefly, we saw gas prices in Washington state spike to be the highest in the country. They've since come down quite a bit from then, but that is a factor here. And that is what led to this 2117 effort. You can see what the petitions look like when they were distributing this, said, stop the hidden gas tax. We disagree that it's a hidden gas tax, but we can see the point that it did have some impact on gasoline prices. And they have a very simple slogan. the people who are promoting 2117. Vote yes to pay less.
You freeze up?
Simple.
Oh,
Can you hear
the
me?
very simple slogan, I think, is pay less.
Yes.
And we'll get more from Mike as soon as he connects again, I guess.
Oh, did I get disconnected? Okay.
He's there. Mike's there.
Can you still hear me?
Yes,
Hello, hello, hello. Yes?
I think Reed is,
Well, maybe Reed's disconnected. Yeah.
I think so.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll just continue on while Reed figures that out. And so let me go to the next slide here. Sorry, what's it doing here? Okay. So what is 2117 in the end? It is a initiative that would repeal the Climate Commitment Act, which is the act we've just been talking about, and also prohibit any future carbon pricing efforts in Washington State, and decrease the funding that we've been talking about. So here's the actual ballot language that you'll see on the ballot in November. And I've just highlighted a couple of things that won't be highlighted on the ballot, but that I've highlighted here to sort of draw attention to. So it prohibits the state from imposing any type of carbon tax credit trading and repeals the legislation establishing the cap and invest system. That is the Climate Commitment Act. And so it really stops, as I said, the law is not perfect. It probably needs tweaks, but this stops any tweaks from happening and from any other moves in the future to try to do this. It really would be a big step backward. And new this year in initiatives, we haven't had this in the past, but new this year is what's called a Public Investment Impact Disclosure, or a PID. And that is the last sentence here that gets written by the Attorney General of the state. And it's supposed to be an unbiased description of what the impact of a yes vote on this would be on public spending. Sometimes I think we've seen very attractive initiatives that say, hey, vote for this and you'll save money, and it doesn't ever describe, but what am I going to lose if I vote for this? And so that's what the PID is trying to do. So you can read that last sentence says, this measure would decrease funding for investments in transportation, clean air, renewable energy, conservation, and emissions reduction, which is really all the things we've just been talking about that the CCA is funding. It would reduce all those because all that money would just go away if this passes. The campaign that's come together to oppose this is a coalition of over 450 organizations, which is really unprecedented. When people look at this coalition, they say, wow, I've never seen Microsoft and Amazon, along with native tribes and unions and environmental organizations in the same group. These are people that don't always agree on everything, but they've all agreed. Seattle Chamber of Commerce, even BP America, the British petroleum subsidiary here in America, has taken a position that they don't want this overturned, which may seem surprising, but I think, they don't describe why they've taken that position. But I think part of it is that they sort of feel like this is the devil they know from their point of view, and they can fix it, they can tweak it, they can make it better, and they'd rather do that than start from zero again and start who knows what the next thing that's going to be passed is. You can see the full list of organizations of all 450 of them on the No 2117 website. There's a list of the coalition there. And just breaking news here, we had here in Bainbridge Island on last Monday at the city council meeting, they passed a resolution urging a no vote because they see the impact that it would have on spending in our city, particularly the ferries, as I mentioned, but a lot of other things as well. We're doing some EV charging installation here in Bainbridge. Some of the solar stuff and energy efficiency stuff benefits us. So the council has encouraged a no vote because they see it as having a negative benefit or a negative impact on the city. So for more information, check out the website, no2117.com, or just email me. I'm happy to talk to anybody. I'm happy to take questions, and I'm happy to talk to you more about this.
So what do we know about the way that this is going? It looks like it might be a close vote, right?
So it is. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of polling on this, as you know, and as you may know, there are 4 initiatives on the ballot in November. So this one's probably getting the most attention, but there are 3 other initiatives on the ballot as well, and there hasn't been a lot of polling on those. what we believe from the campaign that's opposing this is that it's going to be a tough fight. I think that slogan "Vote Yes to Pay Less" is a very compelling slogan, and I think that will sway some people. We feel like it's not really fully disclosing the impact of a vote on that, but there also is no guarantee that gas prices will come down if this passes. It does guarantee that all the spending that we were talking about in various things would go away, but it doesn't guarantee that gas prices would come down because there's so many factors that go into gas prices, and this is one of them, but it may not be the most important one. And as I mentioned, gas prices have already come down significantly, even though the carbon auctions are still happening and actually just happened last week again. So it's not clear that that would really have the impact. So we think it's going to be a tough fight, but we're optimistic, and we think the strength really is that coalition of groups that has come together that is really, really broad. I've been working on climate issues in Washington State for quite a while, and we have not had this kind of a broad coalition on the side again. And then I think the other factor, Reed, a little bit of inside baseball here maybe, but is that a lot of people, when you read that language, let me go back to what the language is. Initiative contains carbon tax credit. This measure would prohibit state agencies from proposing any type of carbon tax credit trading and repeal legislation establishing a cap and invest program. People read that and their eyes glaze over. They don't know what this means. Most people, I mean, people on this obviously are interested and take the time, but most people don't understand what any of that means. And so the default action when people see an initiative like this that they don't understand is either not to vote or vote no, because they don't understand what this really means and what it would do. So I think we're also helped by that there is some kind of built-in no kind of on initiatives.
Yeah, well, and I do think that there's the idea of what this is, the presenting of it as a tax on individuals, when what it is a plan to try to overall, through a number of things, not just our gasoline powered automobiles, but as you showed in the video, the factories and the ways that we get around, our public transportation, a whole number of the forests, a whole number of ways that we can switch the way that we use energy. And it will probably end up, it will definitely in the long term, a total weighted cost be less than continuing to use fossil fuel.
Right. And we're probably going to have to do something about fossil fuels. I doubt that the state would totally walk away from any sort of addressing of fossil fuels and climate change, because it has such an impact on the state in terms of wildfires and all the other things we've been talking about. And so this specific initiative doesn't prohibit the state from doing anything. It just prohibits this kind of an approach. So the state will figure out something else to do that might be much more bureaucratic and much more kind of command and control regulatory to do that, which is part of why I think maybe some of the oil companies are saying, hey, we're not sure we really want to repeal this. We sort of understand how this works, and we can work with the legislature and the state on fine tuning this and improving it. And it is important to note that it's very early days here. This has only been functioning for a year. And so, it's not surprising that there are some glitches. One of the things that the state has already done, even though it was a short legislative session last year or earlier this year, they still took action to combine our market, our auction market for these credits with Quebec and California. And so what that does is it takes a small market and it makes it a much bigger market. And what we think will happen there is it makes more price stability because there are more participants in the market. And so any individual action has less impact. And so we think that will help stable. And in fact, prices have come down in the auctions that are happening. And so we'll see whether that continues or not. But they are already sort of making some tweaks and improvements.
So can you explain what that means if I were a company that was trying to use auction credits instead of immediately retrofitting my business? What does it mean that Quebec and Oregon are involved?
Quebec and California. So there are existing markets very similar to what we established here in Washington. In fact, Washington has learned from what other entities like Quebec and California have done in this area. And so we made some improvements based on that, but it's a very similar mechanism underlying. So what it does is it just expands the market. And so I guess maybe the best analogy is that, if you think of the stock market, there's a lot more, liquidity and a lot more activity. And so prices tend to be more stable on the New York Stock Exchange than on the over-the-counter market, where you have a very, very thin kind of activity, very few traders. Prices might move up and down much more quickly, whereas just the volume of participants in the market helps sort of stabilize the prices. And so that's what's happened here, is we've moved from being just a Washington state market with our allocations to being part of a much, much larger market now. And so we think that will help stabilize. So, it means you can buy permits from people in California, and you can sell permits to people in California as well. And so it makes the market more liquid and more fluid. So.
Great. Anybody here that's on the call have a question?
I do. How much of this money comes from the feds?
So there is federal money coming through the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the separate law, right, that was passed by the Congress 2 years ago now in 2022. And that money is starting to come through the system as well, but it is really different than this. So this law is just a Washington state law, and so it's not getting money from the federal government. It's raising money from large carbon emitters in Washington state, and then spending that money in Washington state. Anything that comes in through the IRA or through other federal laws like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act or some of the others would just augment what is coming in through the CCA and would help us as well. But this is just a Washington state source of funding and a Washington state spending. Any other questions?
This is very informative. I really thank you for. I know that we kind of had to scramble to get this on, but I think this is a wonderful sort of. There are a lot of things on the ballot coming up, and having a better understanding of what this is about makes a difference.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. And as I said, I'm very open to any follow-on questions. Please send people my way. Here's my contact information. And feel free to give me a call or email me. And Reed, thanks so much for sponsoring this and for doing this.
I mentioned that I had been writing these postcards forever and ever and ever. But now it's even clearer for me what it's all about, what I've been doing. And I appreciate what you've done. Thank you, Mike, very much.
Good. Well, thank you for doing, we have a lot of volunteers on this campaign. The campaign is really well organized. And I mean, it's the people that are doing the work like you that really matter. So thank you very much for what you're doing.